My daughter-in-law turned to her guest and laughed. She still thinks she runs things around here. Bless her heart, she doesn't even realize the house isn't hers anymore. I slowly got up from the couch and went to my room without saying a word. The lawyer's office called the next morning. I never imagined that the sound of my own heartbreaking could be so quiet. Nobody else heard it. The clinking of glasses continued. The music didn't stop. And my son, my Connor, my own flesh and blood, looked down at his plate of appetizers as if the pattern on the napkin was the most interesting thing in the world. It was at that exact moment, walking down the hallway I had decorated myself 30 years ago, that a brutal realization hit me. I had not lost my house because of a signature or a piece of paper. I had lost it much earlier, the day I let ingratitude walk through my front door disguised as a cry for help. Before I tell you how I turned my daughter-in-law's laughter into the most bone-chilling silence you have ever heard, I need to ask you for a favor. If you have ever felt like you gave everything for your family only to be paid back with disrespect, hit subscribe to this channel. We do not sugarcoat the truth around here. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe that respecting your parents is sacred. Because what I am about to tell you today is not just my story. It is payback for all of us. That night, we were celebrating Chloe's birthday. I say we were celebrating, but I was the one who had been cooking since 5 in the morning. I made a beautiful pot roast exactly the way my son likes it, whipped up the side dishes, and set up the tables in the backyard. But when the guests arrived, her high society friends, or at least the ones who liked to play the part, Chloe asked me, with sickening sweetness, to sit at the little table in the corner. "Hey, Mom," she said in that syrupy voice she uses to give orders. "It would be best if you sat over there, close to the kitchen, just in case we need more ice. You know, so you do not tire yourself out walking back and forth. I am 62 years old, not 90. I spent 3 decades opening the rolling gates of my fabric shop downtown. I know how to carry heavy boxes. I know how to run the numbers. And I know when someone is treating me like an old piece of furniture that is just in the way. But I sat down. For Connor. Always for Connor. I looked around. My house, the one my late husband and I bought brick by brick with sheer sweat equity, no longer smelled like my home. It smelled like Chloe's expensive, overpowering perfume. They had taken down my paintings. They had painted my warm, cream-colored walls a sterile, minimalist gray that felt like a hospital waiting room. And there she was, Chloe, glowing as if she owned the world, showing off her garden, her remodel, her success. That was when one of her friends, a woman wearing way too much fake jewelry, asked loudly across the room, "Oh my gosh, Chloe, you are amazing. The expansion you did on the living room is absolutely stunning. What does your mother-in-law think of all the changes?" And that is when she dropped the line, the phrase that lodged in my throat like a shard of glass. She still thinks she runs things around here. Bless her heart. She doesn't even realize the house isn't hers anymore. The laughter from her friends felt like slaps to the face. I waited. I swear to God above, I waited 3 endless seconds for my son to step up. Do not talk about my mother like that. We have this house because of her. Just something. But Connor just took a long sip of his bourbon. In that moment, a piece of me died, but something far more dangerous was born. I did not cry. Women like me do not cry in front of people who want to see us broken. I stood up with the dignity of a queen without a crown, smoothed out my skirt, and walked to my bedroom. I locked the door. The noise of the party raged on outside, completely oblivious to my pain. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the landline phone on my nightstand. My hands were shaking, not out of fear, but from a cold, calculating rage. Chloe thought she had won because I signed some papers 6 months ago. She thought I was just an ignorant old woman good for nothing but cooking meals and babysitting imaginary grandkids. What Chloe did not know, and what my son conveniently forgot, is that I read every single line of fine print in that contract before putting my name on it. I looked at the clock. It was 11 at night. I had 9 hours left until the law office opened. I laid down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing the conversation I would have the next day. I did not sleep. I could not afford the luxury of sleep when I was about to teach them the greatest lesson of their lives. When the first ray of sunlight peeked through my window, the phone rang. It was not just any call. That ring sounded like absolute justice. I took a deep breath, picked up the receiver, and listened to the deep voice of Mr. Harrison, my attorney. What he told me on that call made a smile spread across my face for the first time in months. They say a mother's love is blind, but I would argue that sometimes it is deaf and dumb, too. Because my heart screamed at me, my gut warned me, but I chose to cover my ears just to see my son okay. It all started 2 years ago. Not with a party and humiliation, but with tears. Ironic, right? Chloe, the exact same woman who was laughing at me with her rich friends last night, showed up at my front door crying her eyes out, lugging 2 cheap suitcases with a bare, unwashed face. She did not look like she owned the world back then. She looked like a terrified little girl. I remember it was a rainy Tuesday. Connor, my son, was ringing the doorbell with a desperation that no mother could ever ignore. When I opened the door, they were soaked to the bone. "Mom, we got evicted from the apartment," Connor told me, his voice cracking. "The landlord sold the building and we have nowhere to go. I am just asking for a few months, Mom, just until we get back on our feet." What does a mother do when her child asks for shelter? Does she slam the door? No. She opens her home, she opens her pantry, and she opens her heart. "Come inside, kids. Come in. There is always enough food for 3, I told them. And that sentence, spoken with so much love, ended up being my death warrant. My house is not a mansion, but it is my pride and joy. It is located in a nice suburban neighborhood with white picket fences where property values have skyrocketed, on a large lot that my husband and I paid off with blood, sweat, and tears. It easily appraises for $850,000 today. It has a gorgeous backyard full of ferns and hydrangeas that I have tended to for years. It was my peaceful sanctuary. In the beginning, Chloe played the part of the innocent angel. You know the type, the ones who act like butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. She bent over backwards, thanking me. "Oh, Eleanor, what would I ever do without you? You are an absolute lifesaver," she would say while helping me dry the dishes, brewing my tea, and asking about my favorite television shows. I actually started to think, look how lucky my Connor got. He found himself a wonderful woman. What a fool I was. She was not being nice. She was casing the joint. Like a general before an invasion, she was testing my boundaries. The shift was subtle, almost unnoticeable, like water damage creeping into the drywall. First, it was an innocent comment in the kitchen. "Hey Mom, those floral curtains, don't you think they look a little dated? They make the kitchen feel so dark. Why don't we take them down to let some natural light in?" Wanting her to feel happy and comfortable in my home, I agreed. "Sure, honey. Take them down if you want." That was the first crack in the dam. By the next day, she had not only swapped the curtains, but she had also completely rearranged the dining room. A week later, my landscape paintings, the ones my father painted, vanished from the living room walls. When I asked about them, Connor answered without even making eye contact. "Mom, we put them in the storage unit so they wouldn't collect dust. Chloe says a clean aesthetic makes the house feel bigger. Plus, it is only temporary, right?" Temporary. That word became their favorite shield. 3 months went by, then 6. The surefire business venture Connor was supposedly going to invest in never materialized. Meanwhile, I watched them walk through the door carrying shopping bags from Nordstrom, brand new sneakers, and high-end cologne. I was eating canned soup and grilled cheese sandwiches just to stretch my Social Security checks, assuming they were saving every single penny for a down payment on their own place. But no, they were financing an illusion of wealth while living rent-free under my roof. I started to feel like a stranger in my own living room. If I wanted to watch television, Chloe was already binge-watching her shows and would actually huff in annoyance if I sat down on the couch next to her. If I wanted to invite a neighbor over for coffee, Chloe would make a disgusted face and lock herself in her bedroom. Or worse, she would deliberately walk out into the living room in her pajamas just to make my guest feel awkward so they would leave early. Connor, my sweet boy, the one who used to defend me from everything, had turned into a shadow. Every time I tried to set a ground rule or draw a boundary, he hit me with the emotional blackmail. "Mom, please. Chloe is under a lot of stress right now. Do not start with your rules. Just be patient with her. She is not used to living like this." Living like this? Like what? With a solid roof over her head, hot meals on the table, and freshly done laundry without paying a single dime, but I kept my mouth shut. I kept quiet because I did not want to be the stereotypical nightmare mother-in-law. I stayed silent because I was terrified that if I spoke up, my son would walk out of my life forever. That fear, that terrible, paralyzing fear of ending up alone, is what handed them all the power. But there was one specific day when Chloe's mask finally slipped completely. It was not over money, and it was not over groceries. It was over something that most people would consider junk. But to me, it was my entire history. That day, I realized they did not just want my space. They wanted to wipe me off the map entirely. I came back from the grocery store and saw the garage door wide open. It was pouring rain outside. And there, dumped on the driveway, getting soaked in the storm, was the one thing I had begged God to never let me lose. What I saw made my blood run colder than any insult ever could. I sprinted through the rain, completely ignoring my bad knees, my arthritis, and the fact that my canvas shoes were getting ruined in the mud. There, tossed aside like literal garbage next to the black trash bags, was my antique Singer sewing machine. It was not just any sewing machine. It was a cast-iron heirloom with those intricate gold details you just cannot find anymore. It belonged to my grandmother. With that machine, taking on alterations until 3 in the morning, I managed to pay for Connor's state university tuition when my husband fell ill. Every single stitch from that needle had put food on our table. And now it was lying there, face down, taking the brunt of the downpour like a worthless piece of scrap metal. I tried to lift it, but the wet iron weighed a ton. Or maybe it was just the weight of my own grief holding me down. My tears mixed with the freezing rain. "What did you do to it?" I screamed into the void, hugging the freezing metal to my chest, getting my clothes covered in mud. The kitchen door swung open. Chloe stepped out onto the porch. She was perfectly dry, dressed flawlessly, holding a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. She looked down at me with that fake, pitying expression that absolutely turns my stomach. "Oh my goodness, Mom. Come inside for heaven's sake. You are going to catch pneumonia over that piece of junk." "A piece of junk?" I felt a fire ignite in my chest. "It is not a piece of junk, Chloe," I snapped back, my voice trembling with rage. "It is my grandmother's sewing machine. It was in my bedroom. Who gave you permission to take it out?" Connor appeared right behind her. At least he had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but clearly not ashamed enough to step out into the rain and help his own mother. He just stood there, under the dry overhang, safely tucked behind his wife's arm. "Mom, please do not make a scene. The neighbors are going to see," he muttered, keeping his voice low. "Chloe is just redecorating the guest room so it, looks a little more modern." That machine took up way too much space, and it smelled like old oil. It just didn't fit the vibe we are trying to create for the house. Hearing my son speak in we, actively excluding me from decisions made about my own home, was the first real gut punch. But what Chloe said next was the final nail in the coffin. She took a delicate sip of her coffee and said, with chilling calmness, "Besides, Eleanor, you don't even sew anymore. Your eyesight is going. We figured we were doing you a massive favor by clearing out the clutter you never use. You have to let go of the past to let new energy in. The trash truck comes tomorrow morning. We can just leave it there. Or, if you are really that obsessed with it, you can drag it back into your room. Just make sure you clean it off first. I absolutely do not want mud on the new area rug." I dragged that heavy machine back into my bedroom all by myself. It took everything I had. I scraped up both of my arms, but I refused to let either of them help me. I didn't want their hands touching my history ever again. I spent the entire night wiping down every single gear with an old rag, drying the water out of the mechanisms so it wouldn't rust. I silently begged my grandmother for forgiveness. Seeing my beautiful machine shoved into a corner against the wall next to cardboard boxes filled with my clothes because Chloe had naturally commandeered half of my closet space for her massive collection of winter coats, finally got the message loud and clear. They were not redecorating. They were erasing my footprint. They wanted a house that felt entirely like theirs, where I was just an inconvenient houseguest who had overstayed her welcome. Later that night, Connor knocked on my door. I honestly thought he was coming to apologize. My foolish, hopeful mother's heart wanted to believe he would say, "I'm so sorry, Mom. We totally crossed the line." But he didn't. He sat on the edge of my bed, let out a heavy, martyred sigh he had clearly picked up from his wife, and said, "Mom, since you're still awake, we need to talk about something serious. Chloe and I have this incredible investment opportunity, a business venture that is finally going to get us out of this financial hole, but we need some fast liquidity." I froze. Just a few hours ago, they had literally thrown my past into the garbage, and now they were waltzing in to ask me to mortgage my future. I looked him dead in the eye and saw a complete stranger. But the worst part wasn't that they were asking for money. The worst part was that I, blinded by a toxic cocktail of guilt and manipulation, was actually about to say yes, because when people strip you of your emotional worth, it becomes incredibly easy for them to strip you of your financial worth too. And believe me, the sewing machine was just the opening act. What they took from me next could not be fixed with a polishing rag. That night, sitting on the edge of my bed with Connor, I made the single biggest financial mistake of my entire life. I didn't lose it day trading, and I didn't blow it on a bad purchase. I lost it by trusting the word of a son who had stopped being mine a long time ago. "Mom, it is only $40,000, he told me, squeezing my hands with a grip that masqueraded as affection but was actually pure desperation. "It is to secure a shipping container of imported goods. I swear to you, in 3 months I will pay you back double. I swear it on Dad's grave." He brought up his father. He knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. That money was my life savings. It was my safety net for my prescriptions, or in case I ever got sick and needed to hire a home nurse. It made me physically sick to my stomach just thinking about looking at an empty bank account. "Honey, that is literally everything I have," I whispered. Connor dropped my hands and stood up, acting highly offended. "See? Chloe was right. You do not believe in me. You would rather hoard your money under a mattress than see your own son succeed. Fine, Mom. Forget I asked. We will just keep living like freeloaders." That guilt, that toxic guilt they inject straight into a mother's veins. I walked into the bank the very next morning. My hands were physically shaking when I signed the wire transfer forms. Thomas, the branch manager who has known me for over a decade, looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Eleanor, are you absolutely sure about this? This is a very large withdrawal." "Yes, Thomas. It is for a family business venture," I lied, feeling a massive lump form in my throat. For the first 2 months, it was nothing but empty promises. The shipment is on its way, the business is booming, but the money never found its way back to me. What did arrive, however, was the sheer audacity. While I was literally counting pennies to afford my blood pressure medication and gluing the soles of my old shoes back together to avoid spending money, they were living like royalty inside my own house. Every single day, DoorDash and Uber Eats drivers were dropping off gourmet pizzas, premium sushi, and expensive steaks. The smell of expensive takeout filled the hallways, but not once, not a single time, did they ever ask, "Hey Mom, do you want a slice?" I was eating macaroni and cheese in the kitchen alone, listening to them laugh and watch movies in the living room. One Tuesday, I finally reached my breaking point. I watched Chloe walk through the front door carrying shopping bags from a high-end boutique. Brand new designer shoes, again. I planted myself in the hallway, completely blocking her path. "Chloe," I said, forcing my voice to remain completely level, "Connor told me the business was going through a rough patch, which is why you guys haven't made a single payment to me yet. But I see there is plenty of liquidity for designer heels." She looked me up and down with that cynical, practiced smirk she probably rehearsed in the mirror. "Oh, please, Eleanor, stop being so dramatic. These shoes are a business investment. I have to look presentable for client meetings." "What? Do you want me to show up wearing rags?" "Image is everything. You just do not understand how modern business works." "I understand debt, Chloe. And that money was my safety net." Connor stepped out of the bedroom, drawn out by the argument. "Mom, seriously, stop it," he yelled, instantly taking her side, as always. "Stop suffocating us. You are stressing Chloe out, and it is totally ruining her creative workflow. The money is tied up in assets. It is going to pay out soon. Can you not just be a little patient? You are my mother. You are supposed to be supporting us, not harassing us like some debt collector." They walked away, leaving me standing there talking to the walls. That night, they ordered lobster tails from the nicest seafood place in town. I had a cup of black tea and some stale crackers because my gas had been shut off and I didn't have the $100 required to pay the utility bill, and I was too deeply ashamed to beg them for money. My own money. I felt incredibly small. I felt so stupid. But most of all, I felt completely alone. Even then, I thought that was rock bottom. I thought, well, at least I own the house. If everything goes completely sideways, I can always sell the property and move into a small condo. Oh, how incredibly naive I was. I had no idea that while they were blowing my life savings on shallow luxuries, they were already plotting their final strike. They weren't satisfied with just draining my checking account. They wanted to guarantee that when I died, or better yet, long before I died, there would be absolutely nothing left in my name. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, under the guise of having coffee as a family, when they finally brought out the blue folder. "Mom," Connor said, pouring me a cup of coffee with a level of kindness that immediately put me on edge. "We were talking to a lawyer friend of Chloe's, and we are honestly really worried about you. If something happens to you, the government is going to take a massive chunk of everything in probate court and taxes. We need to protect you." Hearing the word protect come out of my son's mouth sounded sweet, but it was the deadliest poison I had been served yet. What was sitting inside that blue folder was not protection. It was a living death sentence. My father, God rest his soul, always used to tell me, "Sweetheart, in business and in love, get it in writing. If it isn't on paper, the wind blows it away." That advice echoed loudly in my head as we walked into the office of Mr. Sterling. Sterling was not my attorney. He was a close, personal friend of Chloe's family. A guy wearing a shiny suit, way too much cologne, and a smile that completely failed to reach his eyes. "Eleanor, it is a pleasure," he said, holding out a clammy, sweating hand. "Come on in. Have a seat. This will be super quick. Just a standard formality so you can sleep soundly at night." Connor sat next to me, visibly anxious, bouncing his leg up and down non-stop. Chloe, on the other hand, was glowing. She already felt like the lady of the manor. While the lawyer was shuffling the paperwork, she was scrolling through paint swatches on her iPhone, whispering things like, "A pearl gray is going to look absolutely stunning on the exterior trim." They hadn't even secured the signature, and they were already painting my house in their heads. The lawyer slid the stack of papers across the desk toward me. "Here you go, ma'am. It is a standard quitclaim deed. You are just transferring the title over to your son and daughter-in-law to avoid expensive estate taxes and probate later on. Just sign right here and initial here." I picked up the pen. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Connor looked at me with pleading puppy dog eyes. "It is for your own good, Mom. To make sure nobody can ever take anything away from you." I almost laughed out loud. "To make sure nobody takes anything from me," said the man who was currently taking everything I had. But right then, my business instincts, the sharp intuition I had honed over 30 years of negotiating with ruthless textile suppliers, finally woke up. I didn't sign it immediately. I pushed my reading glasses up the bridge of my nose and started reading. "Hold on a second, counselor," I said slowly. "Let me read the fine print." Chloe let out an exaggerated, impatient sigh. "Oh my God, Mom, seriously? Mr. Sterling is a licensed professional. Are you really going to second-guess a lawyer? We are in a rush. I have a salon appointment." "You might be in a rush, honey, but the house is mine," I replied without raising my voice a single decibel, and I kept reading. It was on page 4 where I finally stopped. There was a whole paragraph detailing the rights of the grantees them. But something massive was missing. My security was nowhere to be found. I looked up and made dead eye contact with the lawyer. "Mr. Sterling, this document says the property transfers to their name effective today, but I am not seeing a life estate clause anywhere in here, and I certainly don't see a reversion clause." The lawyer went totally pale for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. Chloe completely stopped looking at her phone. "Reversion? What on earth is that?" she asked, trying to sound dismissive. "Oh, Eleanor, look at you playing lawyer," Sterling chuckled nervously. Well, A life estate just means you get to live on the property until you pass away. And a reversion clause? Well, that is just a rare, outdated formality, stating that if the grantees commit acts of elder abuse, fraud, or become insolvent, the deed is automatically revoked. But we really do not need to put that in writing. You guys are family, right? Putting that in the contract just looks ugly, like you don't trust them. I turned to look at Connor. Son, would you ever throw me out on the street? Never, Mom. I would never do that, he exclaimed, acting deeply offended. Then it won't bother you if we put it in writing, will it? I said firmly. If we are family and there is so much love here, a little extra ink on paper won't hurt anybody. Chloe rolled her eyes, clearly exhausted by the drama. Oh, fine, whatever. Put whatever she wants in there. Put in a clause that if we don't kiss her goodnight, she gets the house back. I don't care. Just let's sign the damn thing. It's just a formality. She just wants to feel important. Poor, foolish Chloe. Her arrogance completely blinded her. She honestly thought words like life estate and reversion due to fraud were just the paranoid demands of a stubborn old woman desperate for control. She had no idea they were ironclad legal traps. She didn't realize I was bulletproofing my entire life. The lawyer, pressured by Chloe to wrap things up, typed up the addendums with a heavy sigh. All right, here we go. Updated with the life estate and reversion clauses. Are we happy now? I signed it. The second the ink bled into the paper, a cold pit formed in my stomach. Legally, the house was no longer solely mine. But that clause, that little Section 4B, was my ultimate insurance policy. Connor and Chloe practically danced out of the office, loudly discussing going out for champagne and oysters using my money, no doubt. I stayed behind, carefully folding my copy of the contract and sliding it into my purse. Congratulations, new homeowners, I whispered to myself as I watched them get into their car without even waiting for me. Enjoy it while it lasts. That brings us back to the present, back to the birthday party, to that defining moment when Chloe announced to a room full of people that the house was no longer mine. She truly believed that the piece of paper I signed 6 months ago was her golden crown, but she missed one crucial detail. She forgot about the fraud and ingratitude clause. And what she did last night in front of all those guests? That wasn't just disrespectful. Legally speaking, it was her execution order. The next morning, when Arthur, my real attorney, called me, he confirmed exactly what I had suspected. Chloe had made a fatal, catastrophic mistake. She hadn't just humiliated me. She had tried to pull a massive financial stunt with the house behind my back, immediately triggering the exact trap I had laid for her. Eleanor, Arthur told me over the phone, are you sitting down? Because what I found at the county recorder's office this morning changes the entire game. Let's go back to that night, to the party, because now that you know exactly what I signed and what I endured, you will understand why my hands were not shaking from fear, but from a cold, absolute fury. The house was packed with strangers. Chloe's friends, upper-middle-class snobs with their designer shirts and hollow, fake laughs. Not a single person greeted me. To them, I was either part of the furniture or, worse, the hired help. In fact, one of the guests, a young guy wearing an oversized, flashy watch, literally held out his empty glass as I walked by. Excuse me, could you top this off with some ice? He asked, without even bothering to look at my face. I stared at him. I wanted to scream, I own this house, kid, and I paid for that damn ice. But my son was standing right there. Connor saw the whole thing. I saw a flash of embarrassment in his eyes. But embarrassment over what? That his mother was being mistaken for the maid? Or was he embarrassed that he didn't have the spine to say, that is my mother. Show some respect? Connor simply turned his back and started laughing at a joke I couldn't hear. That silence from my son was the loudest sound of the entire night. I retreated into the kitchen, my only safe haven. But even in there, Chloe swept in like a hurricane, touching up her lipstick in the reflection of the microwave door. Mom, seriously, hurry up with the appetizers. People are starving out there, and you are just standing around spacing out. Oh, and please, take off that gross old apron before you go back out to the living room. It looks completely tacky. Take it off before you serve. I untied the apron and folded it slowly, placing it on the island counter. I felt a very strange calm wash over me. Not a peaceful calm, but the kind of dead silence that happens right before a massive earthquake. I walked back out into the living room. I stood near the couch, the exact same couch where I rocked Connor to sleep when he had a fever, the exact same couch where I sobbed the day my husband died. And then it happened. The breaking point. Chloe's friend asked about the house renovations. Chloe, holding a flute of champagne, absolutely drunk on her own power, dropped the line. She still thinks she runs things around here. Bless her heart. She doesn't even realize the house isn't hers anymore. It is only a matter of time before we move her into a facility that's a little more appropriate for her age. Laughter. Howling laughter. In that fraction of a second, something snapped inside me. But it wasn't my heart. It was my patience. It was my willingness to play the victim. I looked at Chloe. I looked at her expensive heels, bought and paid for with my life savings. I looked at Connor, cowardly and dead silent, and I finally realized that I no longer had a family. I had enemies sleeping under my roof. I turned around. I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom with my head held high, feeling their judgmental stares burning into my back. "Ugh, she's offended now," I heard Chloe say in the distance. "Whatever. At least she's out of the way." I closed my bedroom door. The thumping bass of the music was muffled, but the sheer humiliation still vibrated through the drywall. I sat on my bed. I didn't even turn on the lamp. In the pitch black, I reached for my address book. My fingers traced over emergency contacts and distant relatives until they stopped on the letter H. Harrison, attorney at law, not Chloe's sleazy friend. Mine. The man who has handled my family's legal affairs for over 2 decades. The man who explicitly warned me not to sign the deed, but who, when he realized I wouldn't back down, helped me draft the secret clause with a knowing wink. I checked the clock on my nightstand. It was 11:30 at night. Tomorrow, I whispered into the empty darkness of my bedroom. Tomorrow, playtime is officially over. I didn't sleep a wink. I laid awake, listening to the party die down, listening to the guests order their Ubers, listening to Chloe and Connor stumble upstairs, drunk and incredibly happy, genuinely believing they had hit the jackpot. I heard them giggling in the hallway. "It is finally ours, babe," Chloe slurred. "Yeah, keep laughing," I thought to myself. "Enjoy tonight, because it is the last time you will ever sleep peacefully." When the sun came up, I took a long shower. I put on my best navy blue pantsuit, the exact one I used to wear when I had to play hardball with difficult wholesale vendors. And I sat in a chair, staring at the phone. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, I dialed. The phone rang once, twice. "Good morning, Eleanor," Arthur's gravelly voice answered. "Arthur," I said, and my own voice sounded so ice-cold that I barely recognized it myself. "It is time. Execute the clause. I want my house back, and I want it to hurt." What Arthur told me next sent a chill down my spine, but it was a chill of pure satisfaction. It turns out that Chloe, driven by her bottomless greed, had tried to pull a masterstroke the day before, right before the party started. A move that, completely unbeknownst to her, tripped the legal wire way earlier than I ever could have hoped. "Eleanor, it is a damn good thing you called. Because yesterday, they attempted to take out a second mortgage on the property, and by trying to do so without your signature as the life tenant, they committed mortgage fraud. Proceed, Arthur. Show absolutely no mercy." Those 6 words left my mouth with a terrifying ease. On the other end of the line, Arthur let out a dry, sharp chuckle. "With pleasure, Eleanor. I have already dispatched the process server. He will be at your front door in less than an hour. What your son and daughter-in-law did yesterday, walking into a bank and trying to borrow against a house that has a life estate attached to it that is fraud in any state in this country. Their little house of cards collapsed before they even finished building it." I hung up the phone. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see the exhausted old woman who was passing around pigs in a blanket last night. I saw the woman who built a booming business out of nothing, the woman who fought tooth and nail with suppliers, the woman who survived market crashes and recessions. I smoothed out the blazer of my pantsuit, put on my classic pearl necklace, the one Chloe always called grandma jewelry, and sprayed my favorite perfume. I smelled like sandalwood and absolute victory. I walked out of my room. The house was a complete disaster zone. The hardwood floors were sticky with spilled alcohol, dirty cocktail napkins were crumpled everywhere, and the smell of stale cigarette smoke and closed windows was nauseating. It was the perfect stage for their downfall. I walked toward the kitchen, my heels clicking loudly against the floor. I wanted them to hear me coming. Chloe emerged from the hallway, dragging her feet. She was wearing a silk robe that was barely tied. Her mascara was smeared under her eyes like a raccoon, and she had a hangover so bad she could barely keep her head up. When she saw me, she scowled, shielding her eyes from the bright morning light coming through the kitchen window. Eleanor," she groaned, her voice thick and raspy. "Why are you making so much noise?" "Keep it down, my head is absolutely pounding. And why on earth are you dressed like that? Are you going to a funeral or something?" I smiled a wide, serene smile that immediately threw her off balance. "No, Chloe, I am not going to a funeral. Quite the opposite, actually. Today is a day of rebirth. I am expecting a very important visitor." "Visitor?" she scoffed, pouring herself a glass of tap water straight from the pitcher. "I really hope it isn't your church friends. I am absolutely not in the mood to deal with a bunch of old ladies praying in my living room. Tell them to come back another time." Right at that moment, Connor walked into the kitchen. He looked even worse than she did, pale, massive bags under his eyes. "Mom, seriously." He started to complain. But he stopped dead in his tracks when he looked at me. He just stared, looking at me like I was a total stranger. He hadn't seen me dressed up like this in years. He hadn't seen me look this powerful in a very long time. "You look nice, Mom," he mumbled, visibly confused. "Are you heading out?" "No, honey. I am staying right here. You guys are the ones heading out." Chloe let out a loud, sarcastic laugh, even though she winced from the headache it caused her. "Oh my God, Connor, your mom and her stupid riddles. She's probably just going to the doctor. Hey, Mom, since you're already all dressed up, can you stop by the diner on your way back and pick us up some breakfast burritos? We are starving, and there is literally nothing in the fridge." I took a few steps toward them. I looked at them with a mixture of profound pity and absolute disgust. "You are going to have to buy your own breakfast burritos, sweetheart. And I strongly suggest you start saving your pennies. You are going to need them." The energy in the room shifted. The air suddenly felt incredibly heavy. Chloe slammed her water glass down on the granite counter and narrowed her eyes at me. Her viper instincts were finally telling her that something was horribly wrong. "What is your problem? Why are you talking to us like that?" she demanded, her tone turning aggressive. "Remember who runs things around here." Right as I opened my mouth to answer her, right as I was about to tell her that her reign of terror had lasted about as long as a hiccup, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal, polite ring. It was loud, heavy, and extremely authoritative. Connor jumped. "Who the hell is that at this hour?" he asked, panicking slightly. "Get the door, honey," I told him smoothly, pulling out the chair at the head of the dining table and sitting down the exact seat Chloe had strictly forbidden me from using. "I have a feeling it's for you." Connor slowly walked to the front door. I heard the low murmur of deep voices. I distinctly heard the phrases "court order" and "preventative eviction notice." I watched the color completely drain from Chloe's face. She froze in the middle of the kitchen, staring at me in horror. And I simply poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, took a long sip, and enjoyed the front row seat to the show. My lawyer walked in, flanked by 2 process servers. The steel trap had officially snapped shut. They say there is no better cure for a hangover than a massive shot of adrenaline. And my son sobered up in a fraction of a second. Connor was staring at the legal document in his hands, his eyes darting frantically back and forth across the page, completely unable to process the words, as if it was written in a foreign language. "Mom, what is this?" he stammered, his voice reduced to a pathetic squeak. "It says, revocation of deed due to fraud and elder financial abuse." Chloe, who was hovering in the kitchen doorway, sprinted over and practically ripped the paper out of his hands. "Give me that. It is obviously just some sick joke your mother is playing," she shrieked, completely hysterical. Her eyes scanned the paragraphs, and her face went from beet red to ghost white. "This is completely illegal," she screamed, spinning around to face Arthur. "We are the legal owners. We have the deed. My lawyer said the house was in our name. Mr. Harrison, a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and an endless reservoir of patience, adjusted his tie and took a step forward. "Ma'am, your attorney made the rookie mistake of failing to explain the difference between a remainder interest and absolute ownership." He pulled another folder out of his leather briefcase and slapped it down on the dining table, right on top of the red wine stains from the night before. "You held a remainder interest," Arthur explained in a calm, almost teacher-like voice, clearly enjoying every second of this. "But Eleanor retained a life estate. That means she possesses the absolute right to use and occupy this property until the day she dies. You cannot legally reside here without her explicit permission, and you certainly cannot attempt to mortgage the property out from under her." Connor gulped audibly. He remembered. "We went to the bank yesterday," my son whispered, staring blankly at the floor. "We wanted to take out a home equity loan to cover some of Chloe's credit card debt." There it was. The ugly truth finally dragging itself into the light. It was never a shipping container investment. It was maxed out credit cards and a shopping addiction. Chloe had been blowing money she didn't have, financing a lifestyle she couldn't afford, and she fully intended to use my house as her personal ATM to bail herself out. "Exactly," the lawyer continued smoothly. "And by attempting to place a lien on the property behind the back of the life tenant, you triggered the automatic reversion clause. You essentially signed your own eviction notice. The transfer of deed has been legally revoked. The property reverts 100% back to Eleanor. And as for you two, well, as of right now, you are trespassing." Chloe let out a frantic, high-pitched laugh, the kind of laugh people make right before they completely lose their minds. No, this cannot be happening. I remodeled this living room. I put down new hardwood floors. I spent thousands of dollars on this dump. You spent money modifying a property that does not belong to you, without the legal owner's authorization," I corrected her, speaking up for the first time from my seat at the head of the table. "And speaking of money, Chloe," I stood up. I walked slowly over to her until we were practically nose to nose. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt 10 feet tall. "You lived here for 2 years, completely rent-free. You ate the food I bought. You ran up my electric, water, and gas bills. And on top of all of that, you manipulated me into loaning you $40,000 that you blew on designer shoes and paying off your shopping sprees." Chloe took a step back, her back hitting the hallway wall. "So what? Are you going to charge us back rent, you cheap old hag?" She spat, practically foaming at the mouth, even though her bottom lip was trembling. "No, not back rent," I said softly. "I am going to charge you for everything." Arthur pulled a third document out of his stack. "We have a signed promissory note right here from your husband, plus a calculation of damages to the property. Legally speaking, you are not homeowners. You are delinquent tenants. And you have exactly 24 hours to vacate the premises, or the sheriff's department will physically remove you. Oh, and regarding the debt, if you do not pay back the $65,000 you currently owe Eleanor by this Friday, we will immediately file for garnishment and asset seizure, starting with that brand new SUV parked in the driveway which, according to the DMV records, is still registered in Connor's name." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Chloe stared at Connor, desperately waiting for him to do something, to scream, to punch the wall, to fight back, but Connor was completely broken. He collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands, sobbing. He wasn't crying for me. He was crying because he knew that car was the absolute last shred of fake status he had left in the world. Chloe, realizing her ship was rapidly sinking to the bottom of the ocean, tried to play her final, desperate card, the emotional manipulation card. She dropped to her knees on the floor. She grabbed onto my legs and started violently, theatrically sobbing. "Mom, please, please do not do this to us. I think I'm pregnant. You can't throw your own grandchild out onto the street." I looked down at her. I looked at the exact same woman who was mocking me with her friends. Just what if it was true? What if there actually was a baby? But then my brain kicked in. I remembered the empty bottles of champagne. I remembered the cigarette she was smoking on the patio last night. A pregnant woman does not chain smoke and drink like a sailor. I violently yanked my legs away from her grasp. "Get up, Chloe. Do not get your makeup on my suit." I turned back to my lawyer. Arthur, what did you say the total debt was? Because I think we forgot to add in the price of my dignity. When Chloe realized her crocodile tears weren't working, she instantly morphed. All that sickeningly sweet mom garbage evaporated in a flash, exposing the true monster I always knew was lurking underneath but refused to acknowledge. "You are a monster," she screamed at me, pointing a finger with a broken acrylic nail right in my face. "Throwing your own flesh and blood out onto the street. Connor, say something, defend me." But Connor just stayed sunk into the couch cushions, looking as pale as a ghost. He knew exactly what an asset seizure meant. He knew their entire house of cards had just blown over. "Mom." "Not the car," my son mumbled, completely ignoring his screaming wife. "The car is the only way I can get to work. Well, to get to my networking meetings. I still owe 30 payments on it." Mr. Harrison opened his leather binder again, completely unfazed. "Connor, that is precisely why we acted so quickly. We are fully aware that you are drowning in debt with the bank as well. If Eleanor does not secure her collateral right now, you will undoubtedly file for bankruptcy tomorrow, and my client is not going to lose another single cent." Chloe let out an ugly, hysterical shriek of a laugh. "And what exactly are you going to take?" "We don't have any cash. The business hasn't launched yet." "Then we will proceed to seize your current physical assets," the lawyer stated, with absolute, icy professionalism. "The 2024 SUV parked out front, the high-end electronics you purchased using Eleanor's investment funds. And, of course, you have until 6 in the evening to completely vacate this property, taking only your personal belongings. Just clothes. Absolutely no furniture, because according to the credit card statements I hold in my hand, the vast majority of the furniture in this house was purchased using Eleanor's credit line, which you illegally accessed." I stood by the dining table, silently watching the entire scene unfold. I felt a very strange, conflicting mix of agonizing pain and incredible relief. Pain, because no mother ever gives birth to a child wanting to watch them fail so spectacularly. But relief, an ocean of relief, knowing that I was finally done being the victim. "Mom." Connor stood up and slowly walked toward me. He reached out to hold my hand, but I gently pulled it back and folded my arms across my chest. "Mom, please forgive me. We messed up. But please do not do this to us. Where are we supposed to go? We don't even have money for a security deposit on an apartment." I looked him directly in the eyes. Those same eyes I had loved so deeply, but that were now completely devoid of any honor or dignity. "Son," I told him, my voice rock steady, without a single tremor. "When you showed up on my porch 2 years ago asking for help, I opened my door. I gave you my bed. I fed you from my own plate. And how did you repay me? You treated me like a burden." By throwing your father's memories into the literal garbage, Chloe violently interrupted, absolutely furious. "Oh my God, are we really going to do the whole suffering martyr routine again? Get over it. The world belongs to the ruthless, Eleanor." I stood up straight. I slammed the palm of my hand down hard on the dining table. The crack echoed through the entire living room and instantly shut them both up. "You are absolutely right, Chloe. The world belongs to the ruthless, and I am very much alive." I walked over until I was standing inches from her face. She was physically taller than me, but in that moment I felt 10 feet tall. "You said last night, in front of all your wealthy little friends, that I didn't run things around here, that this wasn't my house anymore." I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the dead, silent air. "You were right. I don't run things around here. I own things around here, and I do not allow parasites on my property." Chloe opened her mouth to spit another insult at me, but right at that exact second, the heavy rumble of a diesel engine echoed from the street outside. The unmistakable sound of a tow truck backing up. Connor sprinted to the front window. "No! Mom, please! It's the repo guy! Stop them!" Mr. Harrison casually checked his watch. "It is standard legal procedure, son. The vehicle acts as collateral against a portion of the $65,000 you owe. The rest of the balance? Well, we will see how long it takes you to pay that off working a minimum wage job." Watching that luxury car, the ultimate symbol of their fake, fabricated status, get hauled away on a flatbed was the exact dose of brutal reality they needed. Chloe collapsed into the armchair, crying for real this time. She was mourning her image. She was crying because she knew she was going to have to move back to the rough side of town she constantly talked trash about. But this time, without the glamorous title of the wealthy daughter-in-law, I walked over to them one last time. "You have 6 hours," I told them coldly. "Start packing. And Chloe, take your ugly minimalist paintings with you. I am hanging my father's landscapes back up." I turned my back on them and walked into my bedroom. I didn't stick around to watch them pack their bags. I had zero desire to witness the pathetic misery they had brought upon themselves. I closed my door, and for the first time in 2 solid years, I took a deep breath of clean air inside my own home. But the story does not end there, because even though I got my house back, I had to learn how to live with the deafening silence they left behind, and I had to process the final lesson life had in store for me. When the front door finally clicked shut behind them that afternoon, the house fell into absolute silence. A lot of people are terrified of silence. They say loneliness is a terrible companion. But that night, sitting in my favorite armchair, which was finally back in its rightful spot by the window, I discovered that silence is not heavy at all when it is filled with dignity. Months went by. In the beginning, it was incredibly hard. I am not going to lie to you. There were days when I actually missed the noise. I even missed the arguments. Because a mother always misses her children, even when they are ungrateful monsters. I would look at the empty guest rooms and feel the haunting echo of what could have been a happy family. But then I would look at my sewing machine. I had it fully restored. I scrubbed away the rust, oiled the gears, and placed it on a brand new lace doily I knitted myself. It now sat gleaming in the corner of the living room, standing proud like a decorated soldier returning from war. That machine and I were exactly the same, a little beaten up, a little rusted by tears, but we were both still running perfectly. However, that house, that big, beautiful old house, no longer felt like my home. It was crawling with ghosts. In every single corner, I saw Chloe's sneering face or the hunched back of my son taking her orders. So, I made a massive, radical decision. A decision the old Eleanor never would have had the guts to make. I sold the house. I sold it for a massive profit. A sweet young couple bought it, and they promised to fill the backyard with flowers and children. With the $900,000 from the sale, I paid off my minor debts, upgraded my health insurance plan, and bought myself this beautiful condo. It is definitely smaller. Yes, but it is 100% mine. And the best part? I have a stunning view of the ocean. And what about them? Well, gossip travels fast in my old neighborhood. I heard through the grapevine that Connor and Chloe are renting a cramped studio apartment on the wrong side of town. They obviously had to sell off whatever they had left to start paying back the massive debt they owe me and the banks. Chloe was forced to take a job working the reception desk at a dental clinic, and from what I hear, she doesn't laugh nearly as much anymore. Connor got a job driving a forklift at a warehouse. Life, in its infinite, brutal wisdom, finally taught them the lesson in humility that I completely failed to teach them by babying them. Yesterday, my cell phone rang. It was Connor. We hadn't spoken a single word to each other in 6 months. "Mom," he said, and his voice sounded so incredibly exhausted and old. "How are you? I heard you moved to a condo down by the beach. That's awesome. Listen, Mom, I was calling because, well, Chloe and I have done a lot of growing up. We were wondering if maybe we could come down and visit you for a weekend. You know, just to see the ocean, spend some time together as a family." I closed my eyes. I listened to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore outside my window. I knew exactly what would come after that visit. Begging for a loan, asking to move in, demanding forgiveness without actually changing their toxic behavior. I took a deep breath, letting the salty ocean breeze fill my lungs. "Connor," I answered sweetly, but with an unbreakable wall of firm boundaries. "I am so glad to hear you guys are working hard. I truly am. But my home is my personal sanctuary now, and my schedule is completely booked up for the foreseeable future." "Booked? Booked with what, Mom?" "You live alone," he snapped back, immediately sounding offended. I smiled. "I am busy living my life, Connor. My money and my time are currently traveling the world with me. I am finally taking back all the years I spent sacrificing myself to take care of everyone else. I love you, and I pray for you guys every single day. But I finally learned that in order to love you properly, I have to love myself first. Learn how to earn your own keep, son. It will finally make a real man out of you. I hung up. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. I felt absolute peace. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the sliding patio door. I am no longer the burden of a mother-in-law. I am no longer the pathetic old victim getting her house stolen from under her. I am Eleanor. I am the sole master of my destiny, my bank account, and my total peace of mind. Sometimes, family is not the blood running through your veins, it is the absolute peace you carry in your soul. And if you have to take a chainsaw to a few branches of your family tree just to get some peace and quiet, then so be it. And to you, the person who stayed with me until the very end, tell me the honest truth. Would you have had the guts to execute that legal clause and throw your own flesh and blood out onto the street? Or do you think I was way too harsh? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read all of them. I want to know if you have ever been forced to draw a boundary this painful. And please, if this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. We share real stories here, from real women who finally learned that their dignity is absolutely non-negotiable. I am Eleanor, and today I raise my coffee mug to all of us.